apologise. I'm doing this off my phone because at the 11th hour, my computer decided to die. So it was a bit of a rush to get set up on the phone. So sorry if the sort of the screen's moving around a bit. But look, I wanted to just start by saying, or let's go to the agenda page. Yeah. So look, just some house rules. There's a lot in this, and I'll get to kind of trying to deal with each of the different situations that may be happening, and I'm concentrating mainly on regional Victoria and regional New South Wales, given it's a border community. But we'll talk about employer obligations. We'll talk about, obviously, the vaccinations for employees and also for customers, where you have customers that are going to be client-facing, if you like, and talk a little about employer liability and also questions. So just with the house rules, you can, whether you leave your video on or off, that's not so much of a problem. But if you wouldn't mind, just next page, Linda. Yeah, please leave it to mute. There's some questions. There's a chat box at the bottom of the screen that you can ask questions on. And so put them in there, and then Linda will monitor those. And if we've got time at the end, we can try and answer as many questions as we can. So next slide is the obligations and entitlements. And what I really want to spend a little bit of time explaining. We're concentrating on, obviously, the regional New South Wales and regional Victoria, and that's very, very different to what you'll find in Melbourne and Sydney at the moment, and even regional Victoria versus regional New South Wales is quite different in terms of what will be required. But it's really, really important, A, where you are, but also what type of industry you're in, because if you're in manufacturing, for example, it's going to be quite different to hospitality, which might be different to retail, and so on. So this is not a webinar where you can necessarily, what I'm seeking to do here is to provide you with as much information as I can. But because this is so localized, and because it is so dependent upon what you're doing, i.e., do you have customers coming into the business or do you not? Do you have employees that can work from home or can you not? And other factors, it's really a situation where you're going to have a look at your own particular situation and seek advice from Total HRM or ourselves about what situation, what obligations and entitlements you have in your particular industry. So that's just an important takeaway. It's really important where you are and also what industry you're in terms of what might be required. So if we then go to the next slide, which is the main areas of concern, I'll just go through those briefly, and then we can get into a bit of a Q&A where Linda can ask the questions and I'll answer them. So the main areas we want to cover is, can or should I make vaccination mandatory? That's obviously the big question on everybody's lips. Secondly, what do I do about employees who are not vaccinated? That's going to be, a situation. I mean, Victoria is just reaching today, I believe, 80% first vax. New South Wales reached a few weeks ago, and both states are, in terms of double vax, due to get to 70% in either early October in New South Wales or late October in Victoria. And that is where we'll concentrate on those different stages as to what you can and cannot do at that time. How do I manage vaccinated and unvaccinated customers? Because you're going to have both, and how are you going to deal with that in terms of the health orders and the requirements of the government, the various governments? What information can I request about vaccination status? That's been a big question that we've had a lot from clients. Is, well, what about the Privacy Act? What can I do in terms of collecting information from my employees about whether they're vaccinated or not? And then also your liabilities, in terms of vaccinations. So next slide, let's get into the mandatory vaccination of employees questions. So Linda, do you want to just lead the way with the questions?
Yeah, so I guess at this stage, I haven't got any messages from people. So if you want to ask any specific questions, just a reminder to everyone, please just put in the chat box and I can pass that on to and ask that in the forum for everyone. I think the key thing here, Andrew, is just to understand what would you be suggesting is a process around as we move to the things occurring at 70% people being vaccinated, 80% vaccinated. Obviously, what we're seeing is some opening up. So if we think about someone, for example, who's in the hospitality sector, they have increased numbers that they're able to have on their premises if people are vaccinated. So what is this really going to mean for an employer, and how do we move that through that process around engaging with employees around these mandatory vaccination and what that means for you as a business owner?
Yeah, great. So look, that slide has a number of questions which cover that. So let's put those up and then we can sort of answer them as we go. So look, the main thing is, the first question, can I introduce mandatory vaccination? So the answer is going to be very much dependent, again, on what industry you're in, but also take note of the state governments and what they are saying. So take New South Wales, for example. You're going to have a situation in regional New South Wales, if that's where your business is, where at the moment, subject to any lockdowns, which don't occur in your neck of the woods at the moment, but at the moment, you're going to have a situation where you are allowed to have vaccinated, unvaccinated and vaccinated staff in your workplace. Different situation with health, but let's leave health out of it for the moment. Basically, you can employees can choose whether they're vaccinated or unvaccinated in terms of whether they come to work, and also in terms of the customers that you allow in. Now, this is really important because what's going to happen on the 11th of October in regional New South Wales, and I'll get to regional Victoria in a second, but what's going to happen is that it is going to be a requirement, not just in Sydney, but in regional New South Wales, that businesses only allow double vaccinated staff to work in their premises where there is client-facing work. So retail, hospitality, anything where there are, any kind of shop or business like that, your staff are going to have to be double vaxxed in regional New South Wales. Now, and this is where it gets back to the type of work you do, because where you are a business where, it's just an office environment, then they will be able to continue to work from home. They won't need, you can't require them to come to the office if they can work from home. So in that situation, an office worker doesn't necessarily need at the moment to be double vaxxed, because where there's no requirement for them to come to work and be facing customers. So that's a really important takeaway for regional New South Wales, is that as of 11 October, where the situation is currently that you can have unvaccinated staff, you won't be able to do that. So what do you have to do? Then you should be communicating, and I know Linda's been talking to a lot of you about this, but you should be talking to those staff about saying, look, as of 11 October, at least for a period of a couple of months, you won't be able to work for us. It's not our decision. It's a direction of the New South Wales Health that you must be double vaxxed. And so you better go and get vaccinated if you want to continue working. Now, it's really, really important that you don't say you must get vaccinated, right? I mean, that's obviously their choice. You can't tell them as an employer to get double vaccinated, but what you can say is, if you don't, you can't work here. And that's going to be the case from the 11th of October. Now, in regional Victoria, it's slightly less certain, I suppose is the best way to put it. There was I wouldn't call it helpful roadmap that was put out 3 days ago by the Victorian government, because, you can go through, and there's a special one just for regional Victoria. It's 11 pages long, and it covers all sorts of different industries about what they'll be able to do at different stages, right? So In Victoria, Victoria is due to reach its 70% double vax around the 25th, 26th of October. And so what they're saying is that at that time, things will change. And as I understand it, listening to Dan Andrews the other day and also reading that roadmap, it's unclear, but I believe the situation will be that, similar to New South Wales, there will be a requirement in most industries for your employees to be double vaxxed, similar situation to New South Wales, where if you've got client-facing work, pubs, clubs, hospitality, retail, that sort of thing, then your staff will need to be double vaxxed at that point, or they won't be able to work. So again, the table is unclear because it talks about caps, and again, we don't have time to go into the detail of every single industry and what's required, but the bottom line is that as the vaccination rates get higher, there will be less restrictions in terms of the number of people that can come to a hotel or whatever, or come to a workplace. But what's important is that it's likely that your employees and indeed your customers will need to be double vaxxed in order to enter the premises as of that 70% phase kicking in, which again is sort of late October. Now, in 80% in New South Wales, regional Victoria, not much change. Regional New South Wales, not much changes. In 80% regional Victoria, which as I understand it will probably be around mid-November, there will be some subtle changes, but again, it doesn't appear as though those requirements to be double vaxxed are going to change. Now, and I'll get back to the questions, but I really wanted to sort of give you a flavour of what's happening at various stages. And so at 80%, as in regional New South Wales at 1 December, it'll be above 80% by then, but at 1 December in regional New South Wales, it would appear as though those requirements that I've just talked about may go away, right? So you then may be able to have unvaccinated customers and unvaccinated employees working again. So in regional New South Wales, it may be a situation where from 11 October to 1 December, you can't have unvaccinated people working or being in your business, but after that, you may be able to. But what I mean by that is that it will be your decision as employer as to what you want to do at that point. So there won't be a requirement from the government. You won't be able to, in essence, stand behind those orders as of 1 December in regional New South Wales. Now, regional Victoria, because it's a little bit further away, it is less clear. But reading and listening to Dan Andrews the other day, it would seem that he is not going to follow the same path as New South Wales in allowing unvaccinated people back into workplaces and so on at a particular date. He hasn't sort of committed to any date, but he said we're not going to land on a date in December or whatever where that will be able to occur. So there's a lot of information there at different points, but I guess the takeaway, whether you're in regional New South Wales or regional Victoria, is where you have workers that are required, they're in a cafe, they're in somewhere where there's customer facing, you should start talking to them about the fact that it is unlikely that when they hit 70%, whatever state you're in, that you'll be able to have them working in your workplace. And then you'll have decisions to make, whether or not you stand them down, whether or not you terminate. We can get to that in a moment. But that's kind of a bit of a summary. So getting back to the questions, what if clients require, so that sort of covers that first one. Can I introduce mandatory vaccination, and when? Second question, what if clients require vaccination in order to be on site? Now that's going to be a situation that, is going to happen, and, it is already happening a bit at the moment in regional New South Wales. If a client requires vaccination to be on site, so we've got a situation where, for example, you're in the building industry and your business, your business, you're working at a particular site that's not yours. You're building a house, building whatever, and the client who owns that site says, I need evidence that all people that work for you are going to be vaccinated, that are vaccinated. Now, in that situation, the answer is yes, they can. And so that is another situation where you have a business where you're required to work. Let's say you're in the cleaning business, for example, and cleaning offices. And the landlord says, well, in my office, in order to clean it, your employees need to be double vaxxed. They can require that, and you're going to have to comply with that direction in order to work there. So then that gets back to making sure, if you're in that type of industry where you're going to work at a third-party site, that you've told employees that they must be vaccinated. And you need to obviously give them a bit of a time period to do it, right? Because Pfizer's 21 days, AstraZeneca, it's much longer than that. But, if you tell them now on the 29th of September that in regional Victoria, as of around the 25th of October, you may not be able to work, well, that's sufficient time, probably. I'm not totally aware of how easy it is to get a vaccination in the regions. I understand it's a lot harder than the cities. But the point being that they're on notice and you should be notifying them as soon as possible. Now, you can cage it as you can sort of put it as it's likely, but you need to start giving them notice. No point telling them in regional Victoria on the 24th of October that you're going to have to be double vaxxed, because, they will be entitled to be on paid leave in circumstances where they say, well, okay, you've just told me that. It's going to take me 21 days and you need to pay me, in the meantime, right? So it's important to sort of get on the front foot with this stuff, and where you're in a business that's likely going to be required of vaccination, tell them to do it. Do I need to consult? Third question, do I need to consult with employees before introducing a vaccination policy? It's like any, award that you may be under, or really any policy. I mean, I think it's important, and where you've got an EBA, there may be a requirement to do that. But I think it's important to, inverted commas, consult your staff on that. But that's really just telling them, this is the policy we're looking to develop. Do you have any questions about it? But really, I mean, the consultation is really just letting them know that this is what we intend to do, and that do they have any feedback in relation to it. But I do think that it's important that you have a policy. Again, it's going to be a different situation depending on the industry you're in, and even within your own industry, different employees may have different requirements or obligations, right? So if you've got a business where some of it's on site, that is customer facing, and then others are sort of back office, then the back office people that aren't customer facing and aren't needing to be at the office won't have the same requirement for vaccination as the ones that are customer facing. So it's not a one size fits all, and I think you should be developing policies that sort of cater to your different circumstances. And the good thing about a policy then is that you can, like any other policy, amend it from time to time as things change and as public health orders come and go. Question 4, what if employees refuse to be vaccinated? Now that's the key question, and it is happening, and it's going to continue to happen. Essentially, you've got a number of options available to you. If you tell them, we've talked about the types of situations where they are required to be double vaxxed. If they refuse it, then there's a number of options. One is to say, okay, well, look, take regional New South Wales, for example. It's likely that between 11 October and 1 December, you won't be able to work. But as of 1 December, it may be that you can. So why don't you're talking to the employee, why don't you go on unpaid leave for that period? Now, the important thing is they need to agree to that. They need to agree to the unpaid leave. You can't just tell them to take unpaid leave. If they don't agree to that, then you've got to look at termination. And again, I'm not going to get into this too much, but that is an option. It's really, really critical that you, I think, seek some advice at that point from somebody that knows and is an expert in these areas, because that is going to be the subject, I think, of a great deal of litigation. You need to make sure you've got your ducks in a row if you're going to do that. Now, in regional Victoria, where that date where, you know, it's a free-for-all in terms of vaccinated versus unvaccinated is not clear, then that's a harder decision. And it may be that, you know, again, you might ask them to take unpaid leave for a period, and then it can continue to be reviewed by the employee and the employer. And if either party says, well, I'm not interested, I don't want this arrangement anymore, then you need to move to a different option, which may be taking annual leave, or it may end up being termination. And so, again, I'd encourage you to just, you know, be as flexible as possible. But the bottom line is your hands are going to be tied in those situations we've talked about, in both New South Wales and Victoria, depending on the time. Now, getting back to regional New South Wales for a second, whilst I've said at 1 December it's likely that the government won't require it, that's a different question to whether you will require it as a business. And that's a decision, unfortunately, that you will be required to make. And there's a lot that goes into that, right? I mean, okay, you might lose business from not allowing customers that are unvaccinated to come into your business. You might have staffing problems by requiring, by saying, well, I'm not going to allow unvaccinated people to work. But that will need to be measured against the risk of unvaccinated people coming into the premises, and, you know, what seems to be scientifically proven, that an unvaccinated person has much, you know, a much greater chance of catching COVID than a vaccinated person. But again, that will be your decision to make. And I believe that the employers will be able to make their own decision outside of the public health orders if it is a genuine requirement in terms of WHS for other staff and for other customers, right? So, for example, you may come to the decision in regional New South Wales as of 1 December that whilst the state government says I can have unvaccinated people in, I'm not going to, because I'm concerned about the effect that will, you know, the danger and the risk it will have on other customers and other staff. And so I'm going to make the decision to continue for a period of time of not allowing unvaccinated people onto the premises. Now, I don't have a personal view on it. I have a professional view on it. And I think that, you know, employers really need to think hard about why they would open up as opposed to the risk of something happening in the business. But again, it's going to have to be a personal decision in terms of what your business, the risks, what your business is in, and the risks associated with that. But essentially, and again, going back to regional Victoria, who knows? There's no kind of drop dead date on you know, the vaccinated being with the unvaccinated. And I just emphasise that, going back to that, it really is a lot less clear, unfortunately, in regional Victoria at the moment. Hopefully this will be clarified over the next 28 days. But it really, if you have a look at that, you can download it off the government website. But
Andrew,
in some industries, it's really unclear.
Andrew, we'll send that out to everyone so people have got the links after this.
Yeah, right.
Links to the roadmap. I think the key thing, if I can grab your takeaway from that,
yeah, please, yeah.
Really what it sounds like is that it's a lot easier for those industries where it's clear around mandatory vaccination. There are still going to be industries where it's not clear, and then that's going to come down to a business owner decision around what they do. And then come 1 December in New South Wales, it'll come down to a decision for you as a business owner as to what you're going to do moving forward. And that's where you need to think about things like the health and safety risks, reputational risks, that kind of thing. And in terms of that timing for Victoria, that timing is unclear at this stage. I guess the key thing is for New South Wales, that ability to negotiate around someone taking leave without pay, for example, or taking leave if they're refusing to be vaccinated. You can do the same thing in Victoria. What we would hope is that buys the time for, you know, some greater clarity to come from government, and I think that's all levels of government, around what the longer term picture looks like. It is possible, Andrew, we might see that if, depending on how things pan out in New South Wales, they may change their mind, because we are seeing, you know, these kind of decisions. Things are, this is a moving place that we're in at the moment. So what happens come 1 December, this is what the roadmap looks like. And all we can do as business owners is make the decisions based on what we know at this stage.
All right, good summary, Linda. You said in 2 minutes what I've tried to say in 25, so well done to you.
And Andrew, we've got some questions from people, and some of these. Okay. So one of the things here was around, you know, in terms of question just around people are already mandating vaccination because they're seeing the roadmap and that requirement. So they are mandating vaccination for all staff. How do you think this will play out in terms of, from a legal perspective, in terms of people being able to argue that it was, say, unfair dismissal, or even, I mean, they might make a general protections claim and argue that, you know, this is a protected right for them to not be vaccinated. How do you see that playing out for employers?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and this is really playing out in real time. I mean, there was a decision just yesterday in the Fair Work Commission, and it did talk, it was about flu shots, not COVID-19 vaccinations, but essentially they said, and you know, that an employer can require an employee to take a flu shot where it's necessary in terms of business, and they also helpfully commented on what would happen in relation to COVID-19, and it was the same sort of thing. So it wasn't an official decision on that, but it seems to me, you know, it was a split decision, I should say, but the majority sided with an employer who required someone to be vaccinated in order to come to work, where in circumstances where it posed a real risk to the business. So these decisions, I mean, are come down the pike pretty quickly, but at the moment, there's a couple of cases where the New South Wales government's being sued by, and they're in the federal court at the moment, by, you know, various employees that are backed by, you know, unvaxxed groups, I suppose, but they haven't been successful in seeking any, in saying, well, the state government can't make me be double vaxxed. So I believe that where you are an employer and you have a genuine and real concern about the health and safety of your employees, where they'll be in touch with other people, or the health and safety of your customers, then the employer will be able to make that order, make it a requirement that they're double vaxxed. There just has to be a connection to a real risk. Obviously, if it's in an office environment, you know, someone working from home, like my business, for example, I've got all my staff at home, that won't be something I would be able to do at the moment because they can genuinely work from home. And so I couldn't require them to be double vaxxed if they didn't want to be.
Andrew, someone's asked a question just asking about the industries we're going to see vaccinations being mandatory in. Simone, I'll send out the links to those roadmaps that do give more information as to what the industries are and where that's going to be mandatory. In terms of, someone asked a question around the conditions in which someone can get an exemption to be vaccinated. And I know, Andrew, we were speaking about this the other week. Yeah. That it's actually going to be quite difficult to get an exemption. Do you want to talk a little bit to that, or would you like me to?
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's I haven't seen it come up yet, but my understanding is that it's you know, doctors probably been told by, you know, their association that they can't just be giving these out willy-nilly. And so what you might even call dodgy doctors, some dodgy doctors in areas aren't doing it either. But it is a really difficult situation where there are plenty of genuine situations where people won't be able to be, they'll have medical exemptions. And you know, it's really difficult to know what to do with that, particularly in a small business. If you're in a big business, you might be able to put those people in another area where they aren't client facing. But in most businesses, that's not going to be possible. And it's going to be, and I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't have an answer for it really, except to say that, you know, I don't think you ought to be terminating staff immediately on the basis that they have a medical exemption. That's going to create problems. But at some point, you're going to have to test it against the inherent requirements of the role. You know, it may be that you can put them on a period of unpaid leave, for example, for a period of time, or take some annual leave or something like that.
Yeah, Andrew, some of the exemptions, for those who haven't seen it, once again, we'll send out some links around that information. Some people, it's a temporary exemption. So the exemption is up to 6 months, depending on the medical condition. So in those kinds of instances, you might be expected as an employer to behave differently than someone who has an ongoing medical exemption. The other thing from a health and safety risk to consider as a business owner is that if you do have someone who's unvaccinated, therefore, and it's not mandated by the government for you to have a vaccinated workforce, you may decide that actually means there's a greater risk in your workforce of having people who are choose to be unvaccinated coming into your workforce. Therefore, it's actually more important that the other employees are vaccinated in terms of providing that protection for that employee who can't be vaccinated and medically has an exemption to do so. But we'll send out the information. There's the letters, I think it's for New South Wales, for example, the forms to get a medical exemption are already available. I've seen the same in Victoria. So we'll send out the information on that. There's only particular doctors who can actually make these exemptions as well. It's not that, you know, for example, a particular type of medical professional can give an exemption. It's not like a sick leave certificate where you can get one from your pharmacist. There's actually only very specific types of doctors who can actually give the medical exemption.
Yeah.
The other one, in terms, just a question, someone was talking about what happens in terms of what sort of training you might consider for employees if you're running, for example, you're in retail or hospitality, to actually deal with customers who may be unhappy about your requirements around, you know, vaccination status. I don't know whether you have, I know you've got a future slide on that one, Andrew, so we might hold that off and talk about that a bit further down the track, but I see that we've got a question around that.
Yeah, okay, all right, well, we can get to that. I mean, the bottom line, we'll deal with it now because it's fresh in mind, but it's going to be very difficult. I mean, you're going to have an 18-year-old, you know, person that is working in a shop, and they're going to be asking for ID in terms of proof of vaccination from, you know, a 6'6" fellow who decides he doesn't want to be vaccinated. I mean, and wants to come into the store. It's going to be incredibly difficult, and the government really, you know, Gladys Berejiklian is being asked this question every single day in New South Wales. You know, what protections a business going to have? And they don't have an answer for it, unfortunately, at the moment, except to say, well, I hope everybody does the right thing. So it's not really satisfactory. And I mean, you know, Dan Andrews is really no better in terms of having a policy. But what are they going to do? I mean, you can't have a policeman on every shop. And so it is going to require, in terms of training, I mean, I think there just needs to be a decision made about what you're going to do if you get into that situation. And it may be, if you're in a shopping centre, that that there may be security that can be called. Otherwise, it's a matter of calling the police, really. But it is a difficult situation to which I don't really have an answer. It's an operational issue. But the bottom line is there are fines for businesses and people that break the rules.
So I think with Andrew, what we would really encourage people to do there is to decide what your process is going to be for your business in the event that you do have a unhappy customer that may be not following the rules, and then to actually, so agree what your process is and then to train people in that. I mean, we know of people who unfortunately have been assaulted by customers when enforcing requirements around sign-in and the like. So all we can encourage you to do is to please ensure you have a protocol in place for your business, that your people are trained in it. I know that some businesses have gone to the point of actually having to hire an extra staff member to literally be focusing on the people walking in the door to ensure that they're doing the right thing. But I really encourage you to develop a protocol for your business, train your staff in it, and be there to support them, and to have thought through that if things don't go well in your business, how you're going to react and respond to that, because unfortunately there's already examples of where that's occurred in other businesses in our region. So being prepared to respond to that as a business owner is really important, that you've got those protocols and support in place for your staff to deal with customers who might be abusive, for example. We might move on, Andrew, to the next question.
Yeah.
Oh, so the next one, sorry, was what if an employee has a medical exemption and
yeah. So we sort of dealt with that. So we could probably move on to the next slide.
Yeah. So I guess the next piece is around asking whether or not you can ask employees about their vaccination status. So what sort of evidence can we ask for, Andrew?
Right. So, I mean, obviously there's IT systems being developed. You've got the QR codes systems in both states, where, as I understand it, you'll be able to say, okay, log into your QR code, and then that will download green, orange, or red, depending on your vaccination status. And so they say it's going to be quite simple. But other than that, there is also the Medicare passport that is in Apple Wallet or whatever smartphone you have. For those that don't have a phone, I believe there's some other system that you can download. But essentially, there's a certificate that everybody can get, which they'll need to have in order to show that they've been vaccinated. So you can ask for it. Now, in terms of is it a breach of privacy, the answer to that is, I mean, firstly, the Privacy Act only matters for businesses over 3 million turnover, but I believe that everybody should try and comply. And in terms of privacy, there is a general exemption from the Privacy Act in terms of asking for personal information. So the general exemption basically says that where there is a likely and real risk to other people either dying or being seriously injured, you can ask for that private information, which fits squarely, in my view, into this situation, which is that you can ask staff and you can ask customers for proof of vaccination because, in the absence of that, it's likely to cause the death or serious injury to other people. And so that's how you get around any, if you get people emailing you and saying, oh, it's a breach of privacy, that's what you should tell them. And in terms of records that can be kept, again, it's going to be necessary to keep records, again, for purposes such as that third-party situation I talked about. Also, if you're a business that books flights for staff, as I understand it, the airlines are going to require, as part of the booking system, the proof of vaccination. So, again, it can be kept for limited purposes, and that is really to show evidence of the ability for the business to operate with those staff and customers there. And then the last one, can I make the vaccination a condition of employment? This is getting asked a lot. This is like at the in the interview stages. The answer is yes, you can. It's similar to, do you have a back injury? If it's required for heavy lifting, that's a relevant question you can ask. Same with double vaccinated. If it is customer facing, if it's, you're going to be working with other people, close proximity, then that is a question that you can ask in the interview process. Probably less likely you could get away with it if it's a job that can be in the interim worked from home. But again, horses for courses, where it's relevant to the ability to perform the role, then yes, you can ask the question.
Right. Thanks, Andrew. So the next question we've got is in the area of around unvaccinated workers. So really they're talking about if you're not requiring vaccination to be mandatory, or we're after 1 December, for example, in New South Wales, what if vaccinated employees don't want to work alongside an unvaccinated co-worker?
Yeah, so, and this is where it's going to be important. At the moment you can hide behind the health orders and say, well, look, we are required to do this in New South Wales and Victoria at these various dates. And so if vaccinated employees refuse to work on unvaccinated worker, it's not going to matter, right? But then at whatever point you get to where, 1 December in New South Wales and some other date in Victoria, then that's where you're going to have to make the decision. Do I allow unvaccinated people to work, or do I not? Do I allow unvaccinated people into the store, business, or do I not? And whatever decision you make, that's fine. But so in this example, in that situation, if a vaccinated employee refuses to work alongside an unvaccinated employee, they say, well, this is a condition of employment that you must work alongside all employees, vaccinated or unvaccinated. That's a decision we've made, and you have to live with it. And if you don't want to live with it, then you can't work here. Now, that's a brave decision, I would have thought, to make, but it is one that you're going to have to, make and say, because you can understand why vaccinated people will say, oh, I don't want to work alongside someone that's not. And so, but you need to, whatever decision you make, and it's the same in reverse. If you say to the vaccinated people, if you say, well, I require everyone to be vaccinated, then you're going to have to tell the unvaccinated person they can't work here. And you'll be able to do that, again, going back to if you can draw the connection with a genuine, health and safety issue. And the same with the second question, the vaccination is mandatory. What are the options to deal with the unvaccinated employee? So the options are, talked about, and this will be relevant this month or next month, and into the future if you decide to keep only vaccinated people on the payroll, is that you basically say it's a condition of employment that you be vaccinated. You don't have to be vaccinated, but you just can't work here. And if you don't want to take unpaid leave for a period, then there's going to be termination. There'll be unfair dismissal claims that come from it. But where you draw the connection, and again, it's the devil will be in the detail of the way that you execute it, but where you can genuinely draw the connection, then you're going to have to terminate their employment because they can't perform the inherent requirements of the role, which is the ability to work vaccinated.
Andrew, what sort of approach do you see people taking in terms of the type of claims they could make? I mean, someone's asked a question here around someone's made a decision not to be vaccinated. They do have underlying health conditions, but are unable to get a medical exemption. Is that going to be considered to be discrimination if an employer were to either discuss taking them unpaid leave or terminate their employment? What sort of avenues can you see employees being able to take to, I guess, challenge the decision that's being made in this space by an employer?
So there'll be the unfair dismissal avenue, which is you dismiss me, because I didn't want to be vaccinated. That's unfair. There'll be adverse action claims. Similarly, you decided to dismiss me because I wouldn't be vaccinated. I have a workplace right. In essence, it's discrimination against unvaccinated people. There'll be those types of claims and discrimination claims, which is, a similar sort of situation. So yes, there'll be all those, and then, you can bet there will be claims made. And, at the moment, and, we'll update you on this as the claims continue to come through. But at the moment, there hasn't been a situation where an unvaccinated person has been successful in any claim against a business or a government that has said you must be vaccinated. So they have a zero success record at the moment, but obviously it's very, very early days. And again, that's why it's going to be important. You will be found to have unfairly dismissed someone if they're an office worker and they can work from home in the next couple of months, but you say, I want you to return to the work and you've got to be double vaxxed. I think that will be a clear case of unfair dismissal. So again, you've got to be able to draw the connection to the WHS being proximity to other people in the course of doing your work.
Yeah. So a couple of things on that, Andrew, is one, it's really ensuring that as the process that you go through in terminating someone's employment, even looking to implement process around it being mandatory, if you're doing that from a workplace health and safety standpoint, it's about ensuring you follow due process, you do consult, you do have documentation in place, because even if you're taken for unfair dismissal, you still need to have gone fairly through that process. So it's important you still follow an appropriate process if you're doing that. That reduces the, reduces the risks and around that. Probably the other piece there, Andrew, is really around for employers where at the moment we're working from home, but that would not be our normal way of working. So what we're seeing happen is as we start to open up, people are expecting to be able to meet face to face again. I'm thinking of a client, for example, like an accountancy firm. Normally they would meet with the clients face to face. At the moment, they're working remotely, but at some point, the expectation of your customers and clients is that you will meet face to face. So I think that's going to be, how do you see that playing out in terms of that transition where while we might have been able to work from home at a point in time, I guess the customer or client demand is going to shift and the expectation that you will meet face to face again and therefore no longer be able to provide that option maybe to work from home.
Yeah, and I think that's at the moment, both governments are saying where you can work from home, employers must allow them to. And that's both, and that's now, and that's also at 70% and at 80% in these roadmaps. So the bottom line is the next couple of months in each state, I don't think employers ought to be requiring those office staff to return to the workplace. After, in early December in New South Wales and at some point probably in the new year in Victoria, those requirements, limitations are going to be lifted. And then that gets back to, again, where the employer is going to have to make a decision about what they require. For example, an accountant meeting with customers, it may be that those customers say, I don't want to meet unless your people are double vaxxed. And that would be, I think, a fair enough requirement. And so then you're going to need to make the decision at some point, and as I say, New South Wales sooner rather than later, about requiring them. And so what I'm doing in my business, for example, which is an office-based business, is saying to the staff, I don't require you to come in at the moment, but we're going to start to ramp things up in early December and have you back a couple of days a week and so on. And they're all double vaxxed, so it's fine. But, that's going to be the key, is where you start to require them to come back. And again, I get back to, and this is, going back to the other question as well, is in terms of unfair dismissal and so on, you got to give them enough runway to make that decision. You can't say to someone in regional New South Wales on 11, now, as of 11 October, you must be double vaxxed if they're not, because it's 21 days. There's not enough time for them to get double vaxxed if they wanted to. But that's why you need to be having those communications ASAP with those staff and saying, look, I need a response from you that says, at the very least, you've booked yourself in, and evidence that you booked yourself in. And in regional Victoria, you've got a little bit more time. And so 26 October, it seems to be that point. And so you should be, again, having conversations with people now, because it would be unfair if you told them again on the 24th of October that they're required to be double vaxxed and that they lose their job as of the 26th, if that's the only communication you've had. So that kind of just combines the two questions together in terms of what you need to be telling your staff and the amount of time you need to be giving for that.
All right, Andrew, I'm conscious we're over time already. We might skip through the next couple of slides and make sure we're done by 1 o'clock. I can see people are still on the call, so clearly they're still interested in what we've got to say. Let's now talk about in terms of customers. Does business have to tell customers whether or not their employees are vaccinated? And can you require a customer to be vaccinated to be able to enter the premises?
Okay, and I'll give short answers to these. So does the business have to tell customers whether staff are vaccinated? I don't think so. I think they just need to say, and what you should say is, we are complying with all health orders. Because that's I think that would be a breach of privacy to actually tell the customer. So if we're requiring with all health orders, the customer can then make its own decision about that. Can I require customers to be vaccinated to enter the business premises? Yes, you can. And, indeed, you will be required to in most industries over the next couple of months. But certainly you can make the decision for both customers and employees to be vaxxed.
To be devil's advocate, Andrew, because that's what I like to do. With
that
first one, what if a client tells you or a customer tells you, look, I'm immunocompromised, I'm unable to get vaccinated. I need to know whether or not it's safe for me to come into this workplace. How would you handle that situation?
Well, it's a difficult one, and I mean, it's not something that's able to be answered on a webinar, even in an hour, let alone a couple of minutes. But you need to basically. I mean, the answer about the health orders really should tell them that we are required to be vaxxed to enter the store, and you can't if you're not. But you've just got to be careful not to be disclosing people's vaccination status if you decide to go down the I'm allowing unvaccinated people into the store route.
Yep.
And you just have to say we comply with all health orders. If the health order doesn't require it, doesn't require it. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I mean, we can sort of get into that offline if you like, given the time.
Well, I think in that particular instance, you can talk about people being able to do click and collect, or if it's an area where it's not mandatory around vaccination, you could say, look, we'll have to meet remotely to, that kind of thing. So I think there's ways around that without disclosing, potentially disclosing the answer, thinking it through while we talk.
Yeah.
All right, in terms of customers, can we ask customers about their vaccination status?
All right. Who's responsible for checking vaccination status of customers? We've kind of covered that. I mean, that's going to be, unfortunately, your storekeeper. Can I refuse service if information not provided? I think that, the short answer is yes, you can.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Yeah. All right. And just in the last couple of minutes, what are some of the things we can be doing to minimise liability? We've covered off on a lot of these. If we can just cover off on what about the health and safety risks? So vaccination may not be mandatory for your industry, and we've got transmission in the workplace. And can I maybe answer that, and then we can talk about any disciplinary action if there's a refusal. So maybe first around, if vaccination isn't mandatory and we have transmission in the workplace, what are some of the risks we need to be considering as business owners?
Yeah, so look, the matter of it's a tough one, because it is going to be, I mean, if the employer requires it, as long as it's a WHS risk, I think they're going to be okay. I mean, I can't give an absolute answer on that, but at the moment, the government is requiring it, so there won't be any liability at the moment. Where you decide after that, then I think if you can say, look, I had to do it because of the WHS risk, that will be fine. Can't give an absolute answer on that, but I think that's what you should rely upon. And the science. The governments are mandating it, so why can't an employer would be the answer there.
And then the last question here, Andrew, is just talking about around if someone's refusing to be vaccinated and it's mandatory for your workplace, would you go through a disciplinary process around that? Yeah,
so there'll need to be the refusal of vaccinated. You'll need to, as you said before, Linda, consult. You'll need to make sure that you give them a due process, an ability to, if you say to them, okay, well, you're not being vaccinated, we don't have a job for you because you can't perform the inherent requirements of the role. There's a whole lot that goes into that, but providing that you do it for the right reason, and you're going to have to seek advice about this for sure. But provided you do it for the right reason and you follow the proper process. It's like any other dismissal. There just has to be a genuine reason for it, and evidence for it, and follow the process in terms of that. So they're the risks, that you do it for some reason that's not mandatory, or you don't follow a proper process, which is allowing them to tell their side of the story in due process.
And so what we'd encourage people to do there then is ensure that you consult with people, offer them options around potentially around taking leave. So that's be leave without pay, or they may take annual leave or long service leave if that's what they have. So it's about having those conversations, that consultation. And then if you're unable to, if this is going to be an ongoing issue, so it becomes about the inherent requirements of the role, or if it's a situation where they're refusing to take leave, refusing to sort of work with you through some options, you would then need to keep moving through that disciplinary process. But we'd always encourage people, first port of call is do your consultation, look to get an outcome for both sides, and then be moving down a disciplinary process really is I guess a last resort, like we would in any situation.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah. All right, I think I've covered off on all of the, the questions from people. We will send through some information for people who haven't seen the roadmaps. We'll also send through the information around the exemptions. So what will that look like? That as I said before, that's already been made available. And I just really want to say, Andrew, we always value any conversation that we have with you. You're someone who works with us around this region and with our various clients. So I just want to thank you very much for making your time today. I can already see some thank yous in the chat box, and we really appreciate your time. So yeah, thank you very much. And look, obviously this will be a watch this space in terms of seeing how things unfold over the coming weeks and months. Thanks,
Linda. Thanks for the opportunity. And again, apologies for if it was bad audio. I just had some technical issues at my end, but all good. Thanks for hopefully it was helpful.
No, all good. So thank you very much. And thanks, everybody. You'll be able to get a copy of the webinar and this recording afterwards as well. So thanks very much. And everyone have a safe day. Thanks.
Thank you. See you.